Okay, so we are looking at 2B2, which is over weighted averages. Now, this video you might want to reference again in the future when you're starting to work on your first project, which is due at the end of like week 4, because we do use the weighted average idea when we do that project. That whole project's based on weighted averages. So it's like a student grade book and a GPA. So it says an average is a measure of the center of data set. You calculate the average by adding together all the data points and dividing by the total number of data points. So that's what we just did in 2B1. Each number counts equally in the calculation if you do it that way. In a weighted average, some numbers will count more than others or carry more weight. So like in our class, our grade book is weighted because tests are worth more percentage-wise to your final grade than like quizzes or homework, okay? So we're going to show you both types. We're going to do two types of weighted averages. Counts is like your GPA at Ivy Tech. Category percentages is like your Math 123 grade. So if it's a weighted average by counts, you're going to have a variety of items or data worth different values. The frequency of each value is the count. So in other words, they might say, I have sweaters that are going to cost $50 and I'm going to have 20 of those to sell. So 20 is the frequency, whereas the value of each one that they're worth, that we're actually giving the value is the $50. So you're going to have that item amount, like what is the value, and then you're going to have the count. So the frequency. Instead of listing each data entry individually, data is grouped by common values to save time and be more efficient in calculating the average. So there's kind of like this rule here of how you can set these up. You can follow these steps specifically, or you can kind of just look at how I'm going to do it. So let's go ahead and jump in and do an example. So it says a bank wants to understand the customers who are applying for mortgages. Throughout 6 weeks, the bank collected the data depicted in the table below, and this data will help them better serve their customers needing a mortgage. What is the average age of a customer applying for a mortgage? Round to the nearest whole number. Okay, so the values are their ages. So this is people ages 30 to 35. The number of applicants they had in each age group. So if you were actually going to list this out, not that we're going to for all these, you'd have 530s. This is why we use a frequency table. It's a lot to write out. Followed by 731s. So I'd have to keep going. And then 632s and 1233s and 2134s and 1735s. Nobody wants to write out that big long list of data. So what we know though is if you add 530s together, it's the same thing as multiplying them. So the first thing you do when you get your values and their counts for each one is we're going to multiply across. So we've got 30 times 5, which is 150. We've got, and I might share my screen with the calculator version so you can see that. So you can actually see the calculator. Put the calculator up. There we go. So this way you can kind of follow along and see where I'm getting all the numbers from. Okay. So we've got 5 times, or excuse me, yeah, 5 times 30, which is 150. You can see where I got that. 7 times 31, that's going to be 217. We're going to do 6 times 32, which is 192. 12 times 33, and you can type 33 times 12 too. It's the same thing. 396. 21 times 34 is 714. Notice this is the most frequent, or this is the mode. 34, age 34 is the mode because it happened the most. It happened 21 applications. And then 35 times 17, which is 595. Now, we're not looking for the mode, we're looking for the weighted average. So we're going to add, and now here's how you do it. Once you get your multiplication, so this is actually if we were kind of, if we listed out all of these and then we got the totals of each unique value, that's what those are. We need to know the total number of counts because it's not just these many rows. We're not going to be dividing by 6 because that's not how many items we had. The number of applications that we totally had, the counts, those are how many people applied. So 5 plus 7 plus 6 plus 12 plus 21 plus 17. Notice that 68 people applied for a, it looks like a mortgage, is what we were talking about. Now we're going to add up all those multiplication values we got because that's going to be our numerator. That's going to be how many total age, how many total people at their ages added up. If we added up all 68 people's ages, what would it equal? We got to add each of these together. I'm getting 2,264. And then once you have your sum of all your categories, when you did the multiplication and we added them together, you know exactly how many counts or applications we had. We can figure out the average age of the customer. So it's the total ages divided by number of applications. Okay. So 2,264 divided by 68. That's roughly, and it says round to the nearest whole number, that's roughly 33 years old. So the average age of an applicant is about 33. Now, the reason it's not the mode is because there's a lot of variety here. We have some spread out ages in all these different groups. So this is kind of averaging, finding it's a measure of center, but it's not always exactly the dead center value. So it's just, what do we get when we add all of these together and divide by how many people we have? Okay, so let's look at another one. This is a lady knits scarves, gloves, and hats. She sold 30 scarves for $18 each. So 30 is the frequency. That's how many she's selling. And the dollars is the value. I know that for sure when I look at the last sentence because we're looking for average sales price per item. So we're going to be putting price on top for all the items that were sold and then dividing by how many total items we had. So I already know my value. Go ahead and set up my chart is in dollars and my counts is just the how many. So number of items. Okay. So let's put what we know. We've got scarves, which I don't know why I spelled that wrong. Gloves. Maybe scarves is spelled with the F. I'm not sure. It's a good question. And then hats. So we have, and actually we need to make some room for that because we need to put the money there as well. Scarves, gloves, hats. So the scarves were $18 each, the gloves were $15 each, and the hats were $25 each. So this is our money value. There were 30 sold for the scarves, there were 28 sold for the gloves, and 40 different hats sold. Now we got to do our the sum of all the categories, which is going to be the value of each item times the number of items that we sold. That's going to, remember, give you, if there are 30 of these scarves sold and we needed to add up $18 for each one, 30 times 18 gets that for us a lot quicker. So 30 times 18 is $540 that we would have made from the scarves. And 28 times 15 is $420 that we would have made from selling gloves. And then 40 times 25 is 1,000. Now, if you add all this together, I'll double check myself with the calculator. That's going to be the total number of dollars that were collected in that month of sales. But I need to know how many items we sold. So we need to add up the counts. That was 98. So our total number of dollars made is 1,960. And we sold a total of 98 items. So if we divide that, we'll get our price per item, the average. So 1960 divided by 98 is roughly $20. Now, none of her items were actually valued at $20, but if you average together, some of them are lower, some of them are higher than $20. If you average it together, it roughly comes out to about $20 per item. Okay, let me see what we have on the next one. So yeah, I'm actually going to make up a GPA one on this page, so you can add this into your notes or you can just kind of take note of it. I had one in the pre-video, I believe, for the class session for this one, but it's always good to do another one. So let's say we had a student who took Math 123 and made a B. They took, not math, comm, so communications, 101 or whatever it is. I'm not sure what the basic level one is. So they made an A in that. Math 123 is a 3-credit hour class, and comm is also as well. Let's say they took chemistry, and I think it's like 105, I'm not sure, but let's say they made a D in that, and that's a 4-credit hour class. And let's say the person also took their English 111, and they made an A in that, which is the 3-credit hour class. Okay, so let's say this is someone's spring semester, okay? So when we're doing a GPA, you're going to have the grade value, which is what is the letter grade worth? And we have to know that on a 4.0 system, an A is worth 4 points, a B is worth 3 points, a C is worth 2 points, a D is worth 1 point, and an F is worth 0 points towards your GPA, because our GPAs go from 0.00 to 4.00. Okay. And then we need to know the credits. The credits are the counts. How many actual classes did you attempt credit-wise? Not just 4 classes, how many credits did you attempt? So this B would transfer over as a value of 3, and it was a 3 credit hour class. The A is a 4, so we replace that as a 4, and it's a 3 credit hour class. The D is only worth 1, and that's a 4 credit hour class, so that might hurt us. And then the A is worth 4, and we took 3 credit hours. So we need to get our multiplication done first. I'll just put a little dot there for that. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. If we add all of those together, that's going to be their total grade value times credits. So 9 plus 12 plus 4 plus 12, that's going to be 37. Then we need to know how many credits did they take. Well, this is 9 plus 4, so that's 13. So this person's GPA that I made up would be 37 divided by 13. So they earned a total of 37 letter grade values per counts for their credits. And then they took 13 credit hours. They took a full load. So 37 divided by 13, oops, hit times, tells me that their GPA would be about a 2.85. Now, that puts them in the C status, almost a B, but not quite. So that D really, really hurt because it was such a heavy weighted credit. So it's, if you think about it, 13, if you think about 13 credits, think about that as individual, like each credit being an individual letter grade. So this person would have made 3 Bs, 3 As, 3 As, and 4 Ds. That 4 Ds, with it only having a value of 1, is bringing down the average, because you look at it and you think, wow, they had to be somewhere between a 3 and a 4. No, because that 4 different Ds, essentially, if you think of them as individual grades per credit, that really, really hurt their overall GPA. So this is just how you do a GPA calculation by counts. Essentially, you figure out what the grade value is. You say how many credits was the class worth. We multiply to get our sum of all credits times grade value, and we divide that by total number of credits. Okay, so we have one more by count, and then we're going to talk about how to do it by percents. So Amber volunteered to work in the concession stand at a local sports event at the fundraiser for her son's soccer team. The table below shows the items sale, their cost, and how many were sold throughout the game. Find the average price. Again, we're doing price of a purchased food item, so that's per item, rounded to the nearest penny. So we have cheeseburgers, French fries, hot dogs, and tenderloins. The values, this is how much each of them is worth, and that's because we're doing average price. $4, $3, $2, and $6, and then these are our counts. This is how many we sold of each. So again, first step is to multiply and get these values. I'm just going to write them out to the side. That would be $360 worth of cheeseburgers, French fries. They made $120 on that. Hot dogs, whatever 76 times 2 is. That is 152. And I don't know 6 times 45 off the top of my head either. So 45 times 6 is 270. So we need to do 2 things. We need to add up the total number of monies that were collected. That's all of those big numbers we just came up with. That's all of the cash they collected at the concession stand that weekend or that day. Let's see, plus 360. That's $902. I'm going to double check myself on that because I was talking while I was typing. We got 360 plus 120 plus 152 plus 270. It's 902. And then we need to know how many items were sold, how many food items. So 90 plus 40 plus 76 plus 45. That's 251. So we have a total of $902 collected in cash. 251 items, food items were sold. So if we divide that, 902 divided by 251, that's going to be, rounded to the nearest penny, would be $3.59. That's the average per food item. Okay. All right, so now we're moving on. So that was weighted by count. So essentially you make a little table. You do the value of the item that you're talking about times the number of them that you made or sold or whatever it is you're doing with them. You add up all those big value counts that we got by multiplying, and you divide that by the total number of items that were counted, which is this frequency. Okay, so weighted averages by percents is a little different. Each category has a percentage weight. Category percentages must total 100%. I'm still going to use a table like to show you kind of how to set this up, but I'm also going to jump over with one problem. We're going to look at it in Excel because that's going to help you with your project. So we're going to set up the steps to finding a weighted average by percents using a table. You're going to have your categories. You're going to put the weight into decimal form. Now, if you're doing it by hand, if you're doing it by Excel, you can type in the percentages with the percent symbol, and Excel knows that when it calculates with that, it uses a decimal form. So it's a little easier to do it in Excel because you can leave it in percent form. But if you're doing it by hand, you're going to change the percents to decimals. So if it's in decimal form, the total of that should equal 1. If it's in percent form, like on Excel, that total number of percentage will equal to 100%. You're going to put in your averages. So like if your averages are like for us, like homework, quizzes, you look at your grade book, or if you were doing it for yourself, for your project, we give you the data. You don't make up your own. But you get the average from each of those groups, okay? And then we call it percentage points. You take the weight as a decimal times the average for the category, and that's the value we write here. Now, these values should sum up to 100 or less, okay? Because this is out of 100%. This is like a final grade or a final total calculation. We don't divide by the weights at the end. You can, but you'd be dividing by 1. Or if you kept it in percent form in Excel, you'd be dividing by 100. It's really nice to do percentages because if they add to 100%, you just sum up this final column. Okay, so I'll show you how that works. So the syllabus shows that tests, so I'm going to have categories for tests, are worth 60%. So that's going to be 0.60. So I've got my category, got our weight as a decimal. We're going to have the actual average for that group. And then we're going to have those percentage points, which we just abbreviate sometimes as PPTS. Okay. Projects, or sorry, homework's the next thing. Homework is worth 10%. So that'd be 0.10 as a decimal. Projects. So this is not our specific class. This is just some class that they made up. It's 0.20. And quizzes are worth 0.10. Notice this adds to 1. This is 80 and then 20. So that's 0.8 plus 0.2. That's going to be 1. Okay, so this is adding, in percent form, it also adds to 100%. But for calculation purposes, we leave it in decimal form when we're doing it by hand. Okay, now we have our students' actual averages. Now this you do not convert to decimal form because this is their scores. These are their actual scores. This is the weight, this is the scores. So when they averaged all their tests together, they averaged at a 58. Their homework was averaging at 98, so they're doing really good in homework. Maybe they didn't turn in one of their projects, so they've got 32 as the average on the projects, and they've got 87 as the average on the quizzes. Okay, so we're going to take our calculator, and each of these you multiply the 0.6 times the 58. That's going to be 34.8. So let me explain what this means. Because they made an F on their average for their test, there were a total of 60 points, percentage points, up for grab towards their final grade. They just got a little over half of that. So they did not claim the full 60 possible points towards their final average. Okay, they claimed, like I said, about half because it's 58 was the average for that. Now this one they'll have almost, now this is 10 points up for grab towards your final grade because it's weighted at 10%. So this time they made a 98. So they're going to almost grab, you'll notice, all of those points. They got 9.8 possible percentage points. 32, that's going to not be very good because that's a low score from 0 to 100. So in that category that was 20 points up for grab, they only earned 6.4 of those 20 possible percentage points. And then 87, they did pretty good. So but that's again a low weighted column. So they earned 8.7 points. Now, this right here, when you're doing the weighted averages by percents, if everything adds up to 100% on the weights, you just have to add this column and you've got your final grade. So we've got to add the 8.7 plus the 6.4. plus the 9.8 plus the 34.8. That's going to be 59.7. Now, if their teacher rounds, that would round up to a D. If their teacher doesn't round or doesn't say, says rounding doesn't count towards your final grade, this person would end up with an F. I round in our class. So since I've taught you rounding, if you were at a 59.7, the 7 would bump the 9 up to a 0, which bumps this up to a 6. So you would get a D in the class. But still, they could have done so much better if they had done maybe both projects. They lost a lot of points right there, and maybe a little bit better on the exams. But this is definitely, even though you could have an A in homework and a B in quizzes, all of the weights, where the bulk of the weights are, that's going to determine your grade more than anything. Okay. So here's another one. This one's not grade specifically, but it's a Likert scale. So if you've ever taken one of those quizzes where you did like strongly disagree all the way up to strongly agree. So they're saying a 1 is strongly disagree, a 5 is strongly agree. And here's they gave a survey to a bunch of people, and they said this is the percentage they got of each of those results. So like strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, probably agree, and strongly agree. So just a Likert scale. So we're wanting to know what's the average score. Where do people actually typically fall using the percentage weights? So again, you're going to turn each of those into decimal form since we're doing this by hand. So I'm just going to write that off to the side. Remember, that's just dividing by 100 or moving your decimal 2 places to the left. Kind of connected to the decimal point. Okay, and then we're going to get our percentage points. So we multiply each of these together. That would just be 0.03. But we have to do 2 times 0.13. Notice these aren't going to add up to a score of 100 because the highest ranking we can have is a 5. So this is different than exams because exams go from 0 to 100, whereas the Likert scale, you can only go from 1 to 5. So we're getting very small values for that reason. This will add up to some score between 1 and 5 because that's what the average should be. It should be something attainable on the list of values. So 0.92 and then 0.4 times 5, that's 2. So 2.00 if you want to make it look like the others. So if we add these up, so we have 2 plus 0.92 plus 0.63 plus 0.26 plus a 0.03. That is going to be an average score of about 3.84. So what they're telling you there is that we're closer to agree than to neutral. But still the bulk of if you look at everybody on the whole list, we had all their actual individual scores. We're saying that, we're on the more positive output. And you can tell that by the higher weights. There were more participants in the more positive light than there were saying, oh, no, we strongly disagree. So that's why our average came out above the 3. Okay. All right, and then this one is the one I wanted to do in Excel. So I'm going to open Excel and do a split screen, but let me pause my share for just a minute. See if I can get this. Double check. I'll double check before I post the video, but I'm hoping y'all can see everything. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can read the project over here. And because Excel is always so small, I'm going to zoom in on this one. Okay, so we've got this math course where tests are weighted at 60% of the overall grade. So I'm going to make myself, again, for your project, you have a template. You do not need to make this from scratch, but I'm going to make a little grade book score chart kind of for myself, and I'm not going to really make it into a chart. I'm just going to list everything out. And so I'm going to have things going vertically in columns. So we've got tests, we've got projects, we've got quizzes, and we've got homework. Okay. And the test, there were 3 scores for that specific class. There was 50, 85, and 90. Now notice I'm doing all of this because I'm actually going to have Excel give me the averages, not just do them by hand. So I can show you that you can do all of this in Excel. Projects, we had one was a 5, one was a 95, and one was a 70. The quizzes, we had a 90, a 95, an 80, an 87, a 77, and an 85. And for the homeworks, we had 4 100s in a row. Sorry. Then they had an 80, a 50, a 100, a 90, and a 98. Okay. And then I'm going to use this. I'm going to make a little bit of a break. I'm going to set, have a row for myself called average. Okay. Now, like I said, in your project, you don't do any of this really. It's already preset in the template. The numbers are all there. You're just going to be doing the part where we set up the Excel formulas. So for average, and I put a list in the notes as well, you use equals average, and it populates as soon as you start typing that in. Don't use the ones that have the other stuff at the end. We want just the word average. You can double click on that with your mouse, your left clicker, and then you can either highlight by left clicking the three number areas that these are called cells in Excel. These are B5, B6, and B7. Or you can just type B5 colon to B7 and close the parentheses. So you can either type it, you just put a colon between them, or you can just highlight it. Okay, so the average, and the reason this is important is if, say, the teacher had made a mistake and that test score was actually a 60, you can easily fix it and it redoes the average for you. And that would redo the whole grade book. Like it would fix the final grade and everything. So if you set everything up in formula form, you can make lots of adjustments and see the how it changes it. So let's then talk about projects. So we're going to again do equals average. Highlight those three. Okay. Now you can't just equal the average and highlight the first three on the next one because there's more quizzes than the other groups. So we need to highlight all of those. So that's all the way down to D10. And for the homework, it's even more items. So we want to make sure we include all of them. And this time I'll type it in. So we have E5, if I can type colon, and then we're going all the way down to E13. Notice that's highlighted everything, close parentheses, hit enter. So that just shows you the other way of doing it. So these are my averages for each category. So now I'm going to make a separate table just to show you how to do the weighted average. So this part is going to be our weighted average. So if you wanted to set one up for your own personal self, not for your project, we're going to have our categories, which was our test, projects, quizzes, and homework. And then we're going to have, after the categories, we're going to have the weights, which is our percentages. We're going to have the averages. And I'm going to show you that I'm actually going to bring those down exactly as they are. I'm going to copy them as a formula, essentially, because some of them have repeating decimals. We want to include that. And then we're going to have our percentage points. Okay. So when you type in the weights, it's fine to type them in. So we look back at our problem, tests were weighted at 60%. And if you put it in percent form, Excel does know to change it to a decimal when it does the calculations. But you have to put that percent symbol. 20% for the projects. The quizzes were 15% in this specific scenario, and the homeworks were 5%. So this is not, again, our weights. It's just showing you different varieties. So notice that's 80 plus another 20, so that's 100%. Okay. The averages, you don't want to type these in. I don't want to type 75. I want to put equals, and then you're going to hit the cell that had the average. The reason that's important is because remember how I said, if I change this up here to a 60, it should update in both places. That's why we use the cell formulas, okay? So then I'm going to, you can just do equals and get each category's average by highlighting it. It will copy that cell data. Equals this one, okay? Now we have to do our multiplication, okay? So we have to do each weight. So click on the cell. You'll use the times symbol, which looks like a little asterisk. It's on either your number pad or it's a shift and the number 8 on your keyboard. And then you have this. So that's this is the weight and the average for that category. So notice they earned 45 of the total possible 60 points that were available for the final average. Because remember we said the percentage here is how many percentage points are available for your final grade, okay? And that's based on how well you did in that category. So then we have the 20% times the 56.6 repeating. Notice again, I'm doing not number entering, I'm typing in the cell name by clicking on those cells. And that keeps everything connected so that if you change one thing in this entire spreadsheet in the gradebook scores, it will change all of the results, okay? Now, once you get here, you're going to use, this is going to be our final grade down here. It's going to be this one little cell. We're going to sum, so equal sum up our percentage points, okay? So notice this person would have had a C in the class. If they had done, let's say they had done their first project, you know, would that have made a significance different? Let's say they made a 90% on it. Notice I'm almost at a B. If I'd made 100% on it, I would have had a B in the class, or the student would have. So this is the nice thing about having this set up with all the formulas, because then one change in the grade book will filter down all the way to the final grade. So you're going to be doing this in your project one. You're going to be working on we give you a template with a bunch of it's just a fake student we've made up with all their grades. The tables are already kind of pre-made. You're just doing the averages. You're doing the multiplication step to get the percentage points. You're doing the sum. Okay. So it's very simple. You just have to follow those steps, and then you'll have a GPA one. And we do have video resources for the project as well. They're under the module 2 data that we had for this week. Okay. And then that is our ending point for this video, because 2B3 is where we're going to start off when we come back to class next week. All right. Enjoy your weekend.